In July 2023, one of the world's most recognizable brands made a decision that brand valuation experts would later call unprecedented. Twitter, a platform with 237 million daily users and a name that had become a verb in dozens of languages, deleted itself. The bluebird vanished overnight. Tweets became posts. The company rebranded to X. Within months, brand equity estimates suggested the company had erased between $15 billion and $20 billion in value by removing a single word from existence. Advertisers fled. Users mocked the change. Media outlets refused to adopt the new name. This is the story of how a company with one of the most valuable brands in technology chose to throw it away, and why erasing memory turned out to be far more expensive than building a future. Twitter never won the size game. By 2021, it had roughly 237 million daily active users, dwarfed by Facebook's billions and challenged by the explosive growth of TikTok. But size wasn't the point. Twitter occupied a different category entirely. It was the platform where news broke first, where political careers were made and destroyed, where cultural movements ignited. When journalists needed a quote, they pulled from Twitter. When governments made announcements, they tweeted them. When financial markets moved on rumor, those rumors started on Twitter. The platform had generated over $5 billion in annual revenue, not because it was the biggest, but because it was essential. The brand itself was a masterclass in linguistic capture. Tweet had entered the Oxford English Dictionary. Retweet required no explanation. The blue bird was as recognizable as the Nike swoosh. Hashtags invented on Twitter now structured conversation across the entire internet. Twitter didn't need to explain what it was. The language was already embedded in global culture. Brand valuation firms estimated Twitter's brand equity alone, separate from its technology or user base, at $15 to $20 billion. This wasn't goodwill accounting. This was the measurable value of instant recognition, accumulated trust, and behavioral embedding across nearly 2 decades. By early 2022, Twitter faced real problems, but the brand wasn't one of them. The problems were everywhere. User growth had stalled. While TikTok added hundreds of millions of users and Meta pivoted aggressively toward video, Twitter's daily active user count barely moved. Advertisers started questioning whether Twitter's influence justified its ad rates when engagement was plateauing. Wall Street analysts described the situation as important but stagnant. Revenue growth slowed. The company cycled through strategic pivots, trying newsletters, trying spaces, trying subscriptions. Nothing changed the fundamental equation. Then, in October 2022, Elon Musk acquired Twitter for $44 billion. The price represented a significant premium over market value, and it came with immediate consequences. The acquisition was heavily leveraged. Twitter suddenly carried billions in debt service obligations. The financial pressure was crushing. Advertising revenue, which represented roughly 90% of Twitter's income, started collapsing almost immediately. Advertisers paused campaigns amid concerns about content moderation changes. By early 2023, reports suggested advertising revenue had dropped as much as 40% year over year. The math was brutal. Twitter needed to service acquisition debt while revenue was falling, and user growth remained flat. Incremental improvements would not close that gap. Cost cuts alone, even aggressive ones, would not solve the structural problem. Twitter had been acquired at a price that assumed transformation, not optimization. The platform could not remain what it was. It had to become something bigger, more diversified, more valuable. Payments, video, commerce, an everything app. The vision was expansive, but the brand was narrow. And that created a problem. How do you convince the world that a microblogging platform is actually the foundation of a financial super app? How do you shed the perception of what you are to become what you want to be? Leadership faced a choice: evolve Twitter gradually, adding features under sub-brands, or erase Twitter entirely and start over. One approach was safe, the other was definitive. On July 23, 2023, Twitter died. Not metaphorically, literally. The company announced it was rebranding to X. The Bluebird logo was removed from headquarters. The domain twitter.com began redirecting to x.com. Tweets were now posts. Retweets were reposts. Every piece of brand architecture built over 17 years was replaced with a single black letter on a white background. Leadership framed the rebrand as essential to the company's future. Twitter, the argument went, was a cage. The name constrained perception. It signaled microblogging, text, 280 characters. But the vision was grander. X would be an everything app modeled after China's WeChat. Payments, messaging, video, commerce, creator tools, artificial intelligence, all under one brand. A neutral brand. A brand without legacy baggage. A brand that could scale infinitely because it meant nothing yet. The stated logic was clean. Twitter had tried for years to expand beyond its core product and failed. Users still saw it as the place for news and arguments, not video or shopping. Advertisers still thought of it as a text platform. Rebranding would force a perceptual reset. It would signal that everything had changed, that the old rules no longer applied, that the future had arrived. Other options existed. Twitter could have launched X as a separate entity, a sister app that handled payments and commerce, while Twitter remained Twitter. That is what Meta did with Instagram and WhatsApp. Twitter could have introduced new features under the existing brand and let the product evolution speak for itself. That is what YouTube did when it added live streaming and community posts. Twitter could have tested the X brand in one market before going global. That is what virtually every consumer company does with major rebrands. Instead, leadership chose total replacement, immediate, irreversible, global. Why? Because anything less would have been half measures. The vision was not to expand Twitter, it was to replace it. And you cannot replace something while keeping its name. The rebrand was not a marketing decision. It was the declaration that Twitter was over and X had begun. Within weeks, the world would deliver its verdict. The reaction was immediate and merciless. Social media exploded with mockery. Users created memes about X posts, and they even tried to use X as a verb. The phrasing felt awkward and clinical, like calling a tweet a microblog status update. The name X lacked phonetic stickiness, and it could not be verbed naturally. Media outlets, the very institutions that had embedded Twitter into their workflows, refused to adopt the new name. Months after the rebrand, major publications still wrote phrases such as Twitter, now called X, or the platform formerly known as Twitter. Every article that used that phrase was an admission that the rebrand had failed to land. The numbers told a darker story. Brand tracking surveys showed catastrophic drops in aided and unaided brand awareness. The Bluebird, once recognized by over 90% of internet users globally, was gone. The X logo had no history, no associations, no meaning. It was generic. App Store rankings showed downloads declining. Sensor Tower data indicated that X's app engagement was falling, while competitors continued growing, including Threads, which Meta launched in July 2023, and TikTok. Then came the financial reckoning. Advertising revenue continued to collapse. Major brands that had paused campaigns during the acquisition chaos now had an additional reason to stay away. Confusion. When you buy an ad on X, what are you buying? Who is the audience? What does the platform stand for? Twitter had clear answers. X had only promises. Fidelity, which held a stake in the company, marked down its investment by approximately 65% from the acquisition price by late 2023. The implied valuation had crashed from $44 billion to around $15 billion. The brand equity itself had evaporated. Experts estimated that Twitter's brand value, that $15 to $20 billion in accumulated recognition and trust, had been written off in a single decision. This wasn't a gradual decline. It was instant destruction. The company had deleted an asset that took 17 years to build. Competitors didn't face the same headwinds. During the same period that X struggled, TikTok continued its user growth trajectory. Meta's platforms maintained their advertising revenue. Even Threads, despite launching into a crowded market, gained over 100 million signups in its first week by offering a familiar alternative to people confused by X. The market conditions weren't the problem. The rebrand was. By the end of 2023, the situation was clear. The rebrand had not unlocked new user growth. It had not stabilized advertising revenue. It had not clarified the product vision. Instead, it had created a vacuum where a world-class brand used to be, and nature abhors a vacuum. Leadership defended the decision as necessary disruption. In interviews and posts, Musk characterized the rebrand as bold, as forward-thinking, as the only way to break free from Twitter's limitations. The defense rested on one claim, that long-term value creation required short-term sacrifice. But the autopsy reveals three fundamental errors that turned sacrifice into destruction. First, Twitter confused vision with branding. The company believed that changing the name would create the everything app. But brands do not create products. Products create brands. WeChat did not become a super app because it had the right name. It became a super app by building payments, then commerce, then services, and letting the brand expand to encompass those realities. Twitter should have built the financial infrastructure, launched the video platform, and proven the commerce functionality. Then, if needed, rebranded to reflect what it had already become. Instead, it renamed itself based on what it hoped to be. This violated a fundamental principle. Branding amplifies existing value. It does not invent it. Second, Twitter erased user language. Platforms are not just products. They are psychological territories co-owned by their users. The word tweet did not belong to Twitter alone. It belonged to everyone who had ever used the platform. It was embedded in muscle memory, in journalistic style guides, in everyday speech. By deleting it, Twitter severed the emotional contract with its user base. What they should have done was preserve the core rituals while expanding functionality. Let new features have new names. Keep tweets for the core product. Users would have adopted new behaviors without feeling like their history had been invalidated. Reddit added video without renaming posts. YouTube added community features without abandoning videos. Twitter could have expanded without erasing. Third, Twitter bet everything at once. Rebranding is inherently risky for high-equity brands. The solution is staged transformation. Test the new brand in one market. Run it parallel to the old brand. Give users and advertisers time to adjust. Instead, Twitter made the change irreversible and immediate. There was no A/B test, no pilot market, no rollback plan. This violated the principle that high-equity assets demand incremental change, not revolutionary replacement. The final lesson is brutal in its simplicity. Brands are memory machines. They store trust, meaning, ritual, and habit. When you delete the memory, you don't get a clean slate, you get amnesia. Twitter didn't fail because it lacked ambition or because the everything app vision was wrong. It failed because it treated identity as disposable when identity was the product. By mid-2024, X remained a fraction of its acquisition value. Still searching for the future, it had destroyed its past to build. The platform had learned the most expensive lesson in modern branding. You can't remember forward,